It is Tuesday, January 5th. Welcome to our weekly Tiger Club Zoom meeting. We are really excited today to have our old friend Gabe DeArmond from PowerMIZ-ZOO to join us. Gabe, always a wealth of knowledge about Mizzou sports, and we'll have some fast breaking news that he just posted. But first, we want to thank our sponsors, Chicken and Pickle out of North Kansas City, Sports Scene in Lee's Summit, Conrad's in Liberty, Tiger Board out of Columbia, and Stables Grill in Kearney. I'd like to thank Darren Weidick for engineering the Zoom call. Of course, Paul Blackman and Barry Cantor for arranging our speakers every week. Gabe, welcome. We've ordered you a flea market burger, medium rare, to be delivered. I don't know how soon it will get there. So.
Yeah, it should be medium well by the time it gets down the road. So that's cool. That works.
Well, the bad thing about these calls is no flea market food. The good things is we don't always have to wear pants. So we
for the record, I am wearing pants.
I am too.
Want that out there
today. So hey, late. I want to talk to you about Tiger basketball, but some late breaking news on the transfer front. Mookie Cooper, a kid out of Pattonville, was a highly rated recruit a year ago. Went to Ohio State, and we just found out, or you posted, he's coming to Mizzou.
Yeah, he tweeted that about 11:30. He entered the transfer portal, a week or two ago, and everybody kind of thought Missouri and Illinois would be very possible places he would land. And Illinois is going through a coaching change, and nobody knows for sure who's going to be on that staff. Really, I'm sure we're going to talk about some people that might be on that staff a little later. Eli Drinkwitz reeled him in. He made the announcement officially about half an hour ago. 4-star kid in 2020, small receiver, probably a slot guy, but a guy that can play in the backfield if you need him, and a guy that I think maybe the biggest thing for Missouri. I think he could be a pretty good return guy, and I don't know if you guys watched any of the games. The returns seem to be a little bit of an issue at times.
Catching the ball was a problem on punts.
Yeah.
Well, what is this? Let's talk about the recruiting class in general, and in addition to Cooper. For Coach Drinkwitz's full year to dip his toe in the recruiting water, you got to be impressed.
Yeah, I've always kind of had a theory that the program you're recruiting to is more important than the coach, right? I mean, there's a ceiling. If you look at recruiting rankings every year, they're kind of the same. I mean, the same 10, 15 teams are on top. Missouri's generally, somewhere in that 30 to 45 range. And that's just kind of where they live. And I wasn't sure that anybody could change that. Eli Drinkwitz appears intent on proving that wrong. He is, they're the 20th ranked class in the country after the early signing period, which would be the best ranking Missouri's ever had if it holds. Now, Mookie Cooper is not going to count toward that ranking because the way we do things, transfers don't change it, because just because he was a 4-star player a year ago, he may not be a 4-star player this year, I guess is the reasoning. But I mean, nobody can complain about this recruiting class. It is, and that doesn't necessarily mean it becomes the best class of players ever to come through here or anything. But on paper, it's as well as Missouri has done. And so definitely should give everybody optimism going forward. Now, the key is he's going to have to do this a couple more times. If you want to talk about catching Georgia and Florida and playing with those teams, well, this is how they recruit every year. I mean, if they're number 9 every year, then you can't be number 20 and go back to number 35. You got to be number 20 and then number 20 again, and then maybe number 15 once. And when you stack those classes on top of each other, then you start getting enough talent that you hope you can compete with those programs, week in and week out, rather than just, hey, maybe once every few years.
You did a breakout on PowerMIzzou of the scholarships by class recently, but obviously
let's call that a guess.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to ask, is what feeling do you get on some of these seniors who could come back for another year?
Yeah. So basically the way, and I have to constantly remind myself that some people don't pay attention to this, every single day, like we do. So basically what happened is the NCAA said that this year did not count as a year of eligibility for anyone. So if you were a senior, and you want to come back and be a senior again, you can. If you were a sophomore this year, you're going to be a sophomore again next year. What that effectively means is there are no seniors on next year's rosters, because the kids that are going to come back for another senior season don't count toward the 85 overall scholarship. So here's what we know right now. Grant McInnes, Kiki Chisholm, Mike Mayetti, Akil Byers, Markel Utzi, Jamal Brooks, and Dawson Downing are all coming back for effectively a 5th or 6th year. Mason Pack is coming back for a 6th year, and he has been a walk-on, but he is going on scholarship for next year. Larry Roundtree's leaving, Josh Bledsoe's leaving, Tyree Gillespie's leaving, and Damon Hazelton's leaving. So we're waiting on Chris Turner, who posted kind of a cryptic video that indicates he's probably coming back, but nobody knows for sure. Cy Martin, Kobe Whiteside, who everyone expects to come back, but he hasn't officially announced it, and then Micah Wilson are the 4 that we're not sure where they stand, whether they're coming back or not. But again, Whiteside and Turner, we expect to. I would kind of expect Micah Wilson to come back, just taking a guess at it. And then everybody else comes back as whatever class they were this year, which theoretically means Missouri has like 7 spots in next year's recruiting class. Now, that's going to change. We all know that, but it's going to be an absolute mess for 4 years. And add into that sometime in the next 3 weeks, they expect to pass this rule that you can transfer and not have to sit out for a year. I mean, the transfer portal has been the wildest thing I've seen in the last week, and it's only going to get more so.
I see there's like 550 kids currently in that transfer portal?
Honestly, I think it's more. I haven't looked lately, but I think you're up over 1,000 kids if you're talking about all over the country and different levels and stuff. I mean, everybody's changing because it's basically free agency now. They can leave and play anywhere they want to next year. That rule hasn't officially passed, but everybody expects it to pass.
Let's talk about the end of the football season. I think going the year, if we said we're 5-5, that'd be great. And I think we're very satisfied with it. The last 2 games were disappointing. But I think it seemed like the Tigers just ran out of gas and were running out of players.
Yeah. I mean, and so was everybody, right? So, you know, the Georgia game was pretty simple. Georgia's just better at pretty much every position. They were that day, and, you know, those days happen. The Mississippi State one was a little tougher to just say, well, they didn't have enough guys because Mississippi State didn't have any more guys. They just didn't play well that day. You know, I think that was a team that was pretty exhausted. This season, to me, was a success the day of the LSU game. Like, almost no matter what else happened, this was a good year. And then went ahead, beat, into the losing streak against Kentucky, beat South Carolina, beat Arkansas. Everything after that would have been complete gravy. I mean, yeah, you're 5-3. You would have loved to be 6-4. 7-3 was never in the cards, because if Georgia showed up, Missouri just wasn't going to beat them. But yeah, 5-5 is, I mean, that's a good year. Drinkwitz, who loves to give us all crap for picking them to win fewer than 5 games, also said on the bowl, when the bowl was canceled, said, if you'd asked me in July or August on one of these things, if we were going to win 5 games, I probably would have said no. So, you know, kudos to him. He can give us crap for doing it, but he can also admit he was kind of thinking right along with us.
What on the bowl cancellation? What was the source of the outbreak? Was there any one place where the players got exposed?
Well, I mean, it's kind of impossible to say, right? But the problem started really, I think, either the day before or the day they got back from the Mississippi State game. This was not. So 2 things need to be clear. This was not they all got it when they went home and visited their families for Christmas. The other thing that I think needs to be clear, if it was, so what? Good for him for doing it.
Well, I think Alabama and Clemson let their players go home for Christmas.
Right. And Nick Saban did too. And I had a lot of Iowa fans who, I had no idea Iowa fans were such a passionate group until that day, but they were very angry. Said, well, our players stayed here and gave up Christmas with their families. Well, I guess good for them, but like, in 12 months, nobody was going to know who played in the Music City Bowl or who won it. these are human beings, and kudos to Drinkwitz, and Konzo said the same thing. He said, look, if sending my kids home for 3 days means we miss a game, then I'm fine with it. And that's the right outlook. And the one thing that everybody who covers college sports has been told over and over in the last 2 months is people don't understand how hard this season has been on the players. They're basically going from their apartments or dorm rooms to the football facility and back. They don't do any of the things college kids get to do because, and we could have a discussion about whether college students in general should be doing them, but they are, and that's fine. College athletes are not, because college athletes have these multi-million-dollar programs and TV contracts relying on them being healthy enough to show up and play. And, again, it's a whole different discussion whether that's right, how it should be, but they gave up a lot to play this season. And like, even on the bye week, they couldn't go home and see their girlfriend or their parents or their dog or whatever they wanted to do. They couldn't take a trip down to the Lake of the Ozarks and relax with their buddies. They stayed in Columbia in their dorm rooms and basically played video games and didn't do much. And these kids practiced more than any team in Missouri history has practiced to play fewer games than any team has in the last 70 years. So, to me, the Music City Bowl, whatever.
Right. Well, as one who took every precaution and still got COVID, I'm amazed we got through the season. So, overall, do you think Coach will add a few guys through the transfer portal? And are there some recruits out there, high school recruits, that he could add in the second signing period?
Yeah, so they've got before today, they had 5 to 7 spots left in the class. Now, the variance in that number is on two things. BJ Harris and Shamar Pearl were part of this class, and they were not announced as having signed in December. I'm very confident that BJ Harris is still going to be part of this class, so that would knock that number down to 6. Shamar Pearl, I'm not as sure. Mookie Cooper committing today now will knock that number down to 5. They've got 5 spots left. My guess is, I don't know if they use them all on transfers, but it's mostly on transfers. I think you've got to look at an offensive lineman. You might look at a linebacker. You might look at a running back. One of the running backs from Appalachian State just put his name in the transfer portal this morning. Obviously, there's a little connection there to Drinkwitz and all of Missouri's staff, so that's a guy we're watching. I don't know. There could be a safety in there, could be a tight end in there, could be another wide receiver.
Talking about basketball, we can switch to that a little bit. Your column this morning or yesterday about 10 thoughts from Monday morning, I thought your first one was really good. What did we learn this week? I don't know if we learned anything about the SEC. I thought Tennessee was a Final Four team after last Wednesday, and then they got beat by Alabama.
And I still think Tennessee's got every chance to be a Final Four team. What we learned is what we have to learn all over again in the first month of college basketball season every year, that even the best team in the country is going to get beat 3 or 4 times. That, we're a nation of football fans. And so every game we decide as a referee, you lose this game, you're out of the national title race. Well, here's the good thing about every sport except college football. Losing a game doesn't ever mean that, because they have this system that actually allows teams to determine who wins championships on the field or on the court, as opposed to college football, which doesn't. So, nobody thought Missouri was going undefeated this year. Nobody should have. If they did, that's an issue. And what happened against Tennessee was what you get when the better team plays well and the worst team plays terribly. And Missouri's not as bad as it looked that night against Tennessee. Now, they're maybe not quite as good as we convinced ourselves they were in the 6 games before that. But they went down and got a gritty win at Arkansas. That was a big win. Tonight at Mississippi State this is really the kind of game that separates, do you have a chance to win a league title or to be in that top 2 or 3 or not? Because the teams that do are going to go win at Mississippi State. Missouri loses this game, loses at home to LSU, which both are possible, but you start dropping games like that, then you can still have a good year. You can still get in that top 4 or 5, but you're probably not going to be in the top 2 or 3 if you're dropping games like that. I mean, it's all the years in the Big 12, that's how Kansas won it every year. They didn't lose games against bad teams on the road, right? They went and beat them. And every year, whoever was number 2 would lose 1 or 2 games that you just look at and say, well, I don't know how that happened. The teams that win conferences don't lose those games.
Mississippi State looks like a middle of the pack SEC team, but it looks like a bad matchup for Missouri. They're top 20 in defending the 2-point basket. They have a lot of length inside. Missouri does not shoot the 3 very well. This is going to be a tough one, I think.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a rock fight. It's going to be Konzo's type of game. He's probably going to love it, and we're all going to hate it. But like it could easily, I think Mississippi State just played a game that neither team got to 70, and it was an overtime game. So it might have gotten to 70 in double overtime. But yeah, Missouri can't shoot. Like, it's time. Everybody can just admit that now. It's been a season and 8 games. This is not an aberration. These guys are not suddenly going to start hitting 40% of their 3-pointers. They were the worst shooting team in school history last year from 3-point range, and they're worse this year so far. And outside of Mark Smith, there's really nobody that you feel confident in making them on a consistent basis. And Mark Smith kind of runs hot and cold and shows up and disappears at various times. But yeah, Mississippi State's a decent team. They're not great, but they're definitely capable of beating Missouri. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, every game's kind of the same. You got to get Jeremiah Tillman involved. You got to have good Tillman. You got to have Xavier Pinson or somebody else make some plays. And you either got to make shots or win it 62-61.
Speaking of Tillman, what we saw on Saturday was the Jeremiah Tillman I've been fantasizing about since he was a freshman. He was incredible. Can he do that against a taller lineup tonight and stay out of foul trouble, which he did?
Well, you're talking about what we learned. I mean, my first reaction after Saturday was everybody. This is why Tillman is frustrating, because he's got that in him. And Tuesday night, he could do it again, or he could have 4 points and 3 rebounds. We don't know. I mean, Konzo doesn't know. Jeremiah doesn't know. So can he do it tonight? I mean, games he does anything approaching that, Missouri's going to be really good. Games that he kind of is floating and doesn't appear super interested, Missouri's going to have trouble.
I was looking at some numbers this morning, and home teams in the SEC are 4-7 so far. And I looked at the Big 12 out of curiosity, and I think they're 5-10. It's fair to say the pandemic has taken away the home court advantage in college basketball quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to a couple games, and they're not really like games, right? I mean, now I went to non-conference games that were always kind of sparsely attended, but like Mitchell Ford, he said he was covering the bragging rights game, and that had, 150 people in the stands. And he said, it's a 2-point game in the last minute. And I had to keep reminding myself that like this counts, that it matters, because it just seemed like a scrimmage. So yeah, home court advantage is non-existent. And I think one of the biggest reasons home court advantage always existed is because officials get caught up in the crowd, right? And they're making these calls. And I mean, if you look at it, the home teams get more calls. I know Missouri fans would dispute that, but you get more calls at home than you get on the road. I promise that's always been true. Well, there's no emotion to really get caught up in this year. So I think maybe officials are going to inadvertently call more balanced games. Not good. I want to be clear. I'm not saying they will be good at their jobs. They will just be balanced.
Yeah, there were some interesting charged block calls on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, and they went both ways. I mean, there was a play where Mark Smith hit the court, and I still have no idea how an Arkansas player got called for a foul. I didn't think in any way the officials helped either team. I just thought they were just kind of in general not good.
Looking at, I want to ask you another couple questions about football. Of course, we're talking with Gabe DeArmond from PowerMIZ-ZOO. If you have a question for him, please go down to the chat feature, and we'll ask him that in just a few minutes. Ryan Walters being mentioned as the defensive coordinator at Illinois. What do you hear on that?
Yeah, the Ryan Walters looking at jobs doesn't surprise me. The Illinois thing caught me a little off guard last night. But this is, and you can go back 20 years to when Gary Pinkel came in and he brought all these guys from Toledo, and then there was Andy Hill. And nobody was ever going to say it out loud, but for a couple years there minimum, Andy Hill was kind of the outsider on that team, on that staff. And there was a definite feeling of like, hey, there's all those guys, and I'm not really in that club. And Ryan Walters was held over. I'm honestly, I would not have been surprised if he would have left last year. But tells me probably he didn't have a better offer than the $900,000 for 3 years he had at Missouri, and he stayed. Defense was not great this year. There are reasons for that. How much of it is Walter's fault? I don't know, but they got worse. But given the dynamics of this whole thing, if Missouri plateaus or takes a step back, if things don't go well for a year or two, Eli Drinkwitz ain't going to get fired for it. And there's this thing called a fall guy on a staff, right? And Ryan Walters probably going to be the fall guy for that if that happens, and he knows that. I mean, you know, like nobody's told me that. Nobody has to tell you that. It's just use common sense. If Missouri were to go, 5-7 next year and the defense isn't great, and I mean, they're not. Drinkwitz is the offensive coordinator. They're not firing the offensive coordinator. So the defensive coordinator is probably kind of in the crosshairs. So it was kind of like when Frank Haith left for Tulsa, and everybody said, well, I don't get it. He's leaving for a worse job. Well, he's leaving for a worse job that he knows he's going to have for 5 years. He knew he was going to have the Missouri one for maybe 5 months. Ryan Walters knows he'll have the Missouri job maybe for a year. But if he goes to Illinois, he knows he's going to have that job for 3 years. And so even if the per year money is a little bit less, and I'm not sure it would be, but let's say they pay him $750. Well, 3 years at $750 is better than 1 year at $9, So there's some job security there. And I think it needs to be stated. All we know at this point is that there is a report out there from a website that is right a lot and sometimes not right, that Walters has interviewed for the job. That's it. And I know a lot of fans say, well, I mean, he interviewed with a worse program. He's talking about a lateral move. You can't let him come back. That's not how this works. This is years and years ago. There was a former Missouri coach who was mentioned as a potential head coaching candidate at Kansas. And I talked to another coach and I said, he can't go do that, can he? He said, I'll give you about 10 million reasons why he can do it. And he explained to me, he said, coaches don't look at it the way you do or the way fans do. It's a job. I mean, they're all mercenaries, and so look, if Ryan Walters doesn't get that job, and especially, I don't think Ryan Walters was the one that leaked this. I don't think he went public with this, because I tried to reach him last night. Dave Matter tried to reach him, and he certainly didn't answer either one of us. So, hey, his name got out there, and maybe it's not ideal, but Drinkwitz hasn't fired him to this point. And so I think he's okay with him coming back. And I don't think this would necessarily change that. Now, again, I've said since Drinkwitz got the job, I'm not sure Ryan's here long-term, but I don't think this necessarily rules out that he could still be here next year.
A couple other Missouri-related coaches that I just wanted to ask you about. I saw Barry Odom might be in the running for defensive coordinator at Texas. Mm-hmm. And Matt Eberflus, former defensive coordinator under Gary Pinkel, who people weren't real happy with at the end of his stint. I thought he did a pretty good job, but he's being mentioned as a head coach in the NFL. Your thoughts? Yeah,
well, my thoughts, first of all, are that fans are never happy with coordinators, right? Coordinators never do a good job until they leave. Like, Missouri fans wanted Dave Christensen run out of town on a rail. And every single year since he left, gosh, I just wish we could go back to Coach C calling plays. I mean, that's how it works. So, but Eberflus, he's a smart dude, really good guy. I know he interviewed with Houston. I hope he gets a job this year. I hope Deshaun Watson gets someone. I texted a friend of mine who covers the Texans on Sunday night that Deshaun Watson should sue the Texans for what they've put around him. So I hope he gets like a good coach, but not too good of a coach. Obviously, I'd be fine with them being AFC runners up for a few years. With Barry, here's what people need to understand about coaching in college football. Jimmy Sexton is Barry Odom's agent. Jimmy Sexton is Steve Sarkisian's agent. If something happens in college coaching, it's largely because Jimmy Sexton picked up a chess piece and moved it to another spot on the board. I mean, Jimmy Sexton basically runs the coaching carousel every year. By the way, he is Eli Drinkwitz's agent, so he was Mike Anderson's agent. I'll be interested to see what Barry does. To me, he's got a heck of a job right now. They just went 3-7, and people want to build statues of him and Sam Pittman in Fayetteville for that. There's something to be said for that. Whereas if you go to Texas and you're 7-3 for a couple years, they're not firing Sarkisian. So who's heads on the chopping block if you go 7-3, but you don't play in the Big 12 title game? I think a lot of times coaches chase the paycheck or chase the brand name. Sometimes there's a lot to be said for just, and this is a bad example right now, but like Greg Marshall for a long time, he made a lot of money and he was never going to get fired till it kind of became public that he was even a worse person than we thought he was. But there's something to be said for, hey, maybe I won't win a national title, but I don't know, I'm making $1 million too in Fayetteville. My kids could stay in the same place. It wouldn't be the worst thing ever.
You ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right. First from Darren. The current Mizzou Alumni Magazine has a nice snippet by Joe Waljasper about your PowerMIZ-ZOO Journalism Alumni Scholarship. Tell us how that came about.
Yeah, I've heard that. I haven't seen the story yet. They are supposed to mail me some copies. But so back in, I don't know, I want to say like May, kind of when, at the height of everything in America is falling apart between COVID and George Floyd. And after that, I just kind of thought, well, like, it sounds real good. It's real good that everybody's tweeting, hey, I'm into this and I stand for this and whatever. But like, is there something we could actually do? And so I started kicking around the idea of just maybe going to the journalism school and saying, hey, could I fund like $1,000 scholarship for like 5 years, for like a minority student? And Howard Richards, actually the color commentator for the football broadcast, said you should look into getting it endowed. Now, look, man, I'm a sports writer. Like, I don't even read the front page. I said, I don't know what that means, but I'll look it up. So basically it means if you get it to X amount of dollars, it stays there forever. And the school invests the money and gives out the scholarship every year in perpetuity based off the money it earns. And so I said, well, that seems like a big number. I don't really think I can do that, but I know a lot of people in this business that went to Mizzou, so I'll give it a shot. Right. And started reaching out, sent out 30, 40 emails to just people I've known over the years through this business. And I think last week I looked and we're at $53,000 pledged for the scholarship, which is hopefully means that it will start being awarded in the fall. And basically it's going to go to a minority student interested in sports journalism at Mizzou, and it will come with a paid internship to our site every year. So, hopefully it'll work out and give me some cheap labor at the same time. There's never nothing without a little bit of a selfish motive, right?
Well, hats off to you for doing that. And I say that as a fellow J school grad. So you've mentioned that Mizzou will keep the donor to the Golden Girls and Gymnastics building in mind in regards to the new indoor practice facility. Do you have any insight into that and how it could affect the area outside the South End Zone complex?
Yeah, I know there's obviously the new indoor facility needs a place to go. And I think Jim Sturck said that's going to, they anticipate that will be announced at some point this month. There's been some talk that Drinkwitz would like it kind of in that lot G right outside the South End Zone, and it would make sense. But there is that Gymnastics and Golden Girls facility, which was fully funded by one individual whose daughter was a Golden Girl at Missouri. And like those things, this is the difference between college sports and the NFL, right? Or pro sports. I mean, those things matter. When people give a lot of money, they do get to have a little bit of say in, and you can't just pick that building up and move it. And it's not that old. So it's still possible that they figure out how to put that building down there, but they might look at some other alternatives too. I don't really love just putting it where the current one is because, again, you're walking across a bridge across Providence. Some people on our message board have mentioned maybe in lot C, which is kind of up the hill in the corner there, which would make some sense. I don't really know where it'll go or when it'll go there, but like I said, Sturk said they thought they'd have some insight into that later this month.
As an aside, I want to ask you, with assuming this new facility comes to fruition, where does Missouri fit in the conference and facilities now?
Yeah, the truth is I haven't seen very many facilities. Like when I cover in road games, I don't see the weight room or we never get into the locker rooms or anything like that. So I don't really know. I always know Missouri coaches for years have told me, look, you don't have to be the best. You just can't be the worst, right? I mean, people can't walk away from there saying, oh man, that was kind of second rate. So I think with what Missouri's doing with the stadium and with the indoor facility, you got Mizzou Arena, all that. I mean, I think Missouri kind of is somewhere there, middle of the road. I mean, you're never going to have the facilities that Alabama or LSU or some of those places probably have because you don't have the money that those places have, Texas A&M. But as long as the impression is not, I always relate it to the SportsCenter book that Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick wrote. And they said in there, like, you don't have to be good looking to be on TV. You just can't be bad looking. Like the first thing people think when they turn on the show can't be, oh my God, how did that guy get on TV? That's kind of the same with facilities.
Oh, what a comparison. Next question. In the Tigers' lair, a long-running debate is whether or not to sign transferring players who originally turned down Mizzou. With Mookie Cooper transferring, do we glean that Drink bears no hard feeling in that regard, or is this going to be a case-by-case decision going forward? Yeah,
we glean that Drinkwitz believes Mookie Cooper is good enough to help his team on the football field. I don't think it means anything for whether it's Jafar Armstrong or Marcus Washington or anybody else that's rumored maybe to be looking around. It's completely a case-by-case thing. And I do think it's important to point out, like, none of those guys turned Eli Drinkwitz down. He was at Appalachian State or maybe at North Carolina State when some of these guys signed to play in college. So I don't think he should. I think he's smart enough not to hold it against them what happened 3 years ago. If he's good enough to help, look, the guy needs talent. He'll take them.
This is a general college basketball question. To your statement, all teams will lose games. How many games do you think Gonzaga is going to lose before the tournament?
They may not lose a game, actually. They look really good, and they play in the West Coast Conference where there's not a lot of opportunities to lose games. I'd be interested to see what the conversation is if they go into the NCAA tournament with the chance to be the first unbeaten team in 45 years, like how much people would think that mattered playing in the West Coast Conference in a pandemic year. Now they went out and played some solid competition in the non-conference, but they played like 6, not 13. So it would definitely have to go down kind of with an asterisk, I think. But they've got a shot, man. They look really good.
They do. Do you think any of the 5 seniors on the men's basketball team will return for another season?
I'd be awful surprised by it because here's the difference in football and basketball. In football, if you're not playing in the NFL, like, you maybe can catch on in the CFL, but that's about it. Like, they don't have pro football leagues in Israel and Korea and all these different places. In basketball, most guys that are playing at this level can find a place to go earn a paycheck and get paid. And a lot of them actually make pretty decent money. Like, Ricardo Ratliff is like a 3-time MVP in South Korea, and he's making a lot more than the $0.00 he made in his 2 years at Missouri. I don't know what he makes, but it's more than nothing. And a lot of these kids just look, if the choice is get paid to play basketball and live somewhere or not get paid and have to go to class, I mean, that's not a super hard decision. I guess if somebody was going to come back, maybe Mitchell Smith, who, I'll be honest, it seems like he's already been here 7 years. So, year 8 might be on the table. But I'd just be surprised if any of them come back. And Konzo kind of said that even before the season started. He said, we're not really expecting any of them to do it.
What do you think of Konzo's incoming recruiting class?
So the one I've always I've compared it to is the 2000, I want to say 8 class that was Denman and Bowers and English and Ramsey, Steve Moore and Miguel Paul. They had 6 guys in that class. They were all 3 stars. There wasn't like a superstar blue chip recruit in the group. This one is the same, 6 3-stars. Now, there's 2 major differences. Number one, nobody would say Marcus Denman was a 3-star college basketball player. He was a 3-star recruit and a 5-star player. Kim English and Lawrence Bowers, I think it's fair to say, played like 4-star players. Keith Ramsey, probably a 3-star, but like he was just the consummate role player. So if one of these 6 guys becomes Marcus Denman and 2 of them become Kimmy English and Lawrence Bowers, then, hey, you've thrown together a hell of a class. But the other thing is that class, Lawrence Bowers played like 3 minutes a game as a freshman. Kim English started some. Marcus Denman didn't start as a freshman. Those guys mostly came off the bench because they were joining a roster with JT Tiller, Zaire Taylor, Matt Lawrence, Matt Pressey, Damari Carroll, and Leo Lyons, I think. Right. Matt Pressey may not have been on that team yet, but the rest of those guys were. So they were come in and asked to play kind of supporting roles. Kimmy, come in and score 18 points in the first half at Marquette. Marcus, throw in the 70-footer against Memphis. Lawrence, we might need you for 5 or 6 minutes here. These guys are going to have to play a bigger role next season, which is why I think a lot of people, including myself, look at next season and say, let's take advantage of this season because I think next season is going to be a step back.
Well, here's a question for you. How's your dad?
Good. They were actually, my parents came down a couple days after Christmas. It was the first time they'd been to our house in like over a year, I think. They're currently in Florida. It's probably nicer there than it is here.
You think? I always enjoy when you come in to speak to get to see your dad at the flea market. So
yeah, I guess I could have asked him if he wanted to join the Zoom, but I think he would have said no. He's probably on the beach.
Okay. Several years ago, MU fans clamored for Ben Howland to no avail. Looking at his body of work, do we really miss out?
He's been fine at Mississippi State. I think he's a good coach. I think it would have been okay. I don't know that it would have been significantly better than what they've had by any means. Mississippi State, they're decent. But he hasn't matched what he did at Pitt or UCLA yet. So I don't think I would spend a whole bunch of time thinking, hey, what could have been with Ben Howland.
Question on the quarterback situation next year with Tyler Macon coming in. Will he and Bazelak both play? Of course, Brady Cook's in the mix. I heard you on Inside Mizzou Sports. You made a good point that if they don't play, maybe they'll transfer, but we'll still have a quarterback.
Yeah, so be it. I mean, if quarterbacks transfer, they transfer. I could see Macon getting a little action because of the rule that says you can play in 4 games and still redshirt. But this is going to be a kid by next September. It's going to be 2 years since he's played in a football game, and Connor Bazelak had a good year. Like, I think there are still questions, but he was the SEC freshman of the year and threw for 2,000 yards in 10 games this year. He certainly goes into spring football and fall camp as the starter. Now, doesn't mean it's impossible that he loses it, but I've got a tough time seeing Tyler Macon coming in year 1 and winning that job.
And I saw on PowerMIZ-ZOO that the Tigers are very much in on the kid from Georgia, Sam Horn, for 2022. He's a 4-star kid, am I correct?
4-star kid, yeah, not to be confused with the one-time DH of the Orioles and the Red Sox. But he, and Drinkwitz has been clear, and every good coach does this. You sign a good quarterback every year, and if they want to leave, they leave. This team had Chase Daniel, Chase Patton, and Brad Smith on the same roster at one point, and Chase Patton didn't end up transferring, but he also never ended up playing. They had Blaine Dalton and Blaine Gabbert, and Dalton left, and that's fine. They get here, and the ones that don't win the job are going to leave because only one plays. But then you just go get another one. That's the way it goes. Because if you don't, what you end up having is getting to a situation where, hey, Drew Lock just graduated and oh my God, we don't have a quarterback next year. Like, what do we do? You know, and really you have to have two because, you know, people like to say that Gary Pinkel always had a succession plan, and he largely did. But if you remember I think it was 2009, I may have the year wrong, but at some point, it might have been 2011 when Ndamukong Suh kind of wrecked Blaine Gabbert's ankle. Like, they kept trotting Blaine Gabbert out there every week on one leg when everybody watching the game could see he shouldn't be playing, but there just wasn't anybody else. Him on one leg was better than anything else they had. So you almost really have to have two really good ones on the roster. And then, hey, if the backup ends up leaving, then go find another good one and he'll take over when the current guy leaves.
Yeah, it was 2009. It was that Thursday night monsoon game.
Oh, yeah, that was miserable.
Yeah. Just on recruiting, I had a question. Coach Drink looked like he made some inroads geographically to places we hadn't been before. Primarily the one that caught my eye was 2 4-star kids out of Indianapolis. What's his philosophy as recruiting on areas, I guess, as opposed to just concentrating on Texas and Missouri? Yeah,
I think I actually thought getting the kids out of Indianapolis was the most impressive thing he did in this class, because those are just kids that Missouri doesn't normally get. I mean, they've gotten 4 stars. They've done well in state before, but they rarely go out of state and get top 250 kids like Kyron Montgomery. So, and look, I've said for a long time, really since Missouri made the move to the SEC, I thought Gary Pinkel missed a chance to say, you know what, let's go into Indiana and Illinois and even maybe a little into Michigan and Ohio and tell these kids, hey, if you want to play in the best conference in the country, this is the closest place you can do it. Like, Indianapolis is a 6-hour drive from, or even less than that, maybe 5.5. I should know. I've been there 100 times, but so you can tell these kids, hey, you can come play in the SEC and your parents can drive down and watch 6-7 games a year, you know, in person, when that's a thing that people can do again. So I thought it was good that Drinkwitz kind of got into that market. And also just recruiting is becoming more and more regional and national every year, especially this year when it was all done online. Like, there was no, hey, having to line up travel and flights and stuff. It was like you make a FaceTime call anywhere in the country at any point you want. So I think I think more kids probably stayed home simply because they didn't have a chance to see some of the places that were farther away. Without visits, you're more comfortable going with where you know. But again, recruiting boundaries expand every year. And so there's no reason that Missouri shouldn't be able to go into Indiana or Nebraska or Colorado like they did this year and get a kid.
Any talk of honoring Coach Pinkel with a statue or facility name? Yeah,
people have brought it up. I'm wary of doing that with living people. Frequently it doesn't turn out great and you have to take it down. And I'm not at all insinuating that Gary Pinkel is anything less than an excellent human being. He always has seemed to be a good person. He's treated me well, all that, but I don't know. Is that, you know, I mean, if you wait, then you kind of know everything. If you don't wait, you know, you kind of end up sometimes having to do what they did in State College, and that's no good for anybody.
Question. It seems perennially both the men's and women's basketball teams have a horrendous turnover problem. Is there a way to cure that by coaching, or do they have to focus on ball control abilities of recruits?
Yeah, well, Konzo did joke the other day he was going to name one of his grandchildren Turnover. And it's been an issue. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I watch a ton of women's basketball, but that's what stuck out to me as much as anything on the occasions I have. Like, even Missouri's good women's teams were turning the ball over like 24 times a game. And I mean, it was just, I don't know. It was bad. Yeah, the turnovers are an issue. And the ones that, like, you can live with on a fast break, you make a bad pass, or, you know, hey, you're going in for a layup and you pick up an offensive foul. You can live with that. But the ones that are maddening are just, you just drop the ball, or you're standing on the wing and you traveled trying to make a move, like completely unforced. The defense had nothing to do with it. I mean, I guess you'd like to say that you could coach that out of kids, but, like, I don't know. They're in high major college basketball. They've known not to travel for a long time. Sometimes things just happen, you know? I mean, it's not like these guys get there and they say, Well, I don't know, coach. My high school coach told me I didn't have to dribble. I could just run with the ball, So, yeah, you work on it, but I don't know if some guys just turn the ball over more than others.
All right, Gabe, one last question. I read your predictions for the NFL playoffs on your column yesterday. You have the Ravens winning this weekend. So let's assume a Ravens-Chiefs matchup next week. What do you think?
Look,
I'm a little nervous about it.
Yeah, I mean, I like what Sam Ellinger wrote on this. The way I always do my NCAA tournament bracket, I just start out and I say, okay, if this team plays an A game, 6 straight games, who's winning the tournament? If the Chiefs play an A game, 3 straight games, they're winning the Super Bowl because their A game is far and above better than, I mean, they played an A game like for 4 halves this year and they went 14-1 in games that they tried, So if they play a B game, I think they might win the Super Bowl. But if they play a C game, somebody's going to beat them. I don't know. They'll be favored in every game. I think they'll get back there, and I think they'll win it because I think we went through this transformation at some point last year, and I think for most of it, it was the Texans game, but for some of us, it happened sooner. And like I have these text exchanges with my friends during Chiefs games, and some of them tend to be a little more high strung and nervous than others. And like, I always just reply like, but they're going to win. Like, I don't know how, but all I know is that they're going to win because they have this guy at quarterback and that's what he does. I mean, whether it's, suddenly a field goal taking a right turn in midair or whether they score 52 straight unanswered points. Like, I don't know how they're going to win, but the only thing I know is that they're going to win. So until they don't, I mean, they've won 23 of the last 24 that they attempted to win.
Right. Well, my son during the Texans game, I was sitting up in the upper deck. He lives in Chicago, texted when it was 24-0, he said, #fire Andy. And I said, let's simmer down a little bit. I've never let him forget that.
But nobody thought they were, because I texted my son at 24-0 and I said, well, the good news is that like, it's not going to be stressful now. I just know they're going to lose and I'll just sit here and watch the rest of the game and it's fine. And same son who was with me at the wild card game. And when the second 3-run home run went out of the stadium, I said, well, it was fun to be here. And he said, they're fine as long as they don't give up another run. And he was right. So maybe he's smarter than me.
We've had some incredible sports to watch here in Kansas City comebacks. Yeah. Two guys sitting next to me at the wild card game left.
Nice.
All right. Hey, Gabe, thank you. Really appreciate your time as always. And hope you and your family have a great new year. Folks, next week we have a change in schedule. Peter Baugh from The Athletic was scheduled to be our speaker, but he is no longer on the Mizzou beat as of this week. Gave any insight on that? He's going to hockey.
He's covering the Colorado Avalanche, so good for him. I guess that's a promotion. I don't know. I don't consider hockey a promotion from anything, but good for Peter. Yeah, happy for him.
So we'll have Vahe Gregorian next week from the Kansas City Star. He's always a great interview. Coming up later this month, Dave Matter and John Sunbolt. So make sure you tune in every Tuesday. And we always have great guests. Again, thanks to Paul Blackman and Barry Cantor for arranging that. Gabe, have a happy new year. And again, thanks for sharing your day with us. Folks, if you have any feedback you'd like to give us, go to info@kctigerclub.com. Shoot us an email. Go to our website, kctigerclub.com. We need members. It's our only source of revenue this year, so we really need your support. And please spread the word and ask more people to join us on these calls. So everybody have a great day. And again, Happy New Year.